I had meticulously planned every facet of this wedding down to the finest detail: the flowers, the venue, the seating arrangements. Months of careful coordination, all culminating in what was meant to be the happiest day of my existence. And for the longest time, I genuinely believed it would be. I never questioned him, never doubted the love we shared, until, in the most unremarkable way imaginable, my entire world shifted. It was merely a notification, a harmless little ping from his phone while he was in the shower. I wasn't the type to snoop. Trust was the bedrock of our relationship, or so I thought. However, something about that previewed message made my stomach clench. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My hands froze mid-motion, my pulse quickening. Perhaps it was a mistake, a wrong number, a misunderstanding, but I knew better, didn't I? A part of me already knew. Against every instinct screaming at me to stop, I swiped the screen, and there it was. Dozens of messages stretching back months, plans, declarations, lies woven into my life so seamlessly that I almost laughed. Almost. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the ease of it, the confidence he exuded. He had never been careful because he had never thought he needed to be. He truly believed I would never question him, never leave him. I replaced the phone exactly as I found it, my fingers strangely steady. No tears, no dramatic outburst, just a quiet, creeping clarity. I glanced at myself in the mirror across the room, searching for something. Pain, anger, devastation, but all I found was certainty. The wedding wasn't happening. Not in rage, not in heartbreak, just done. I didn't utter a word when he emerged from the shower, rubbing his hair with a towel, flashing me that easy, practiced smile. The same smile that had once made me feel safe, adored. Now, it was just another lie. I watched him move around the room, completely unaware that his carefully constructed facade had already crumbled. If he noticed anything different about me, he didn't show it. Or maybe he had convinced himself that I'd never be the type to walk away. And maybe before today, he would have been right. I had invested so much time believing in us, fighting for us, that the idea of letting go had never crossed my mind. But standing there in that room, filled with wedding invitations and bridal magazines, I realized something. I didn't owe him a confrontation. I didn't owe him the courtesy of an argument or the satisfaction of watching me break. He wasn't worth the performance. Instead, I went about my day. I made the final confirmation calls with the caterer. I approved the last-minute flower arrangements. I let my mother ramble excitedly about the rehearsal dinner, while my bridesmaids sent pictures of their dresses. I played the part of a woman still heading toward her wedding day, not because I was in denial, but because I was in control. Let him think everything was fine. Let him believe I was still blissfully unaware. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not give him that power. Because tomorrow, when the wedding he thought was inevitable never happens, when he realizes I'm gone and that there's nothing he can say to fix it, that will be the moment he understands exactly who he underestimated. That night, I lay in bed beside him, staring at the ceiling, listening to the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. He slept so easily, so peacefully, as if nothing in his world was out of place, as if he hadn't spent months lying to me, slipping away into someone else's arms. The arrogance of it almost made me laugh. He had no idea that by morning, everything he took for granted would be gone. I turned onto my side, watching the way the moonlight traced the familiar contours of his face. For years, I had loved this man. I had built a future around him, convinced myself that he was my home. But now, in the quiet darkness, I felt nothing. No anger, no sorrow, just a strange, exhilarating weightlessness, like taking a deep breath after holding it for too long. The moment I found those messages, something inside me had unlatched, and now I was free. I thought about waking him up, thought about whispering, "I know," thought about watching the panic set in, the scrambling for excuses, the desperate attempt to rewrite the truth. But no, that would give him too much importance. He wasn't worth my rage. He wasn't worth my time. Let him sleep, blissfully unaware. By the time he opened his eyes, I would already be gone. And there would be no dramatic confrontation, no closure wrapped in a bow. I closed my eyes, feeling the tension drain from my body. Tomorrow, everything would change. The wedding was off. My life was finally mine again. And the best part, he wouldn't see it coming. Morning arrived crisp and indifferent. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, stretching across the bed like it had on any other day. But today wasn't like any other day. Today was supposed to be my wedding day. Instead, it was the day I walked away. I moved quietly, methodically, slipping out of bed without waking him. My packed suitcase was already waiting by the door, one final detail in a plan I had pieced together overnight. No frantic calls, no explanations, just a clean break. The way I saw it, he didn't deserve a farewell. He didn't deserve my anger or my pain. The only thing he deserved was the silence I was about to leave behind. Downstairs, I sent the email. One message to the wedding planner, another to the venue, one last to the caterer. The wedding is canceled. Please direct any outstanding matters to the groom. That was it. No apologies, no long-winded justifications. Let him figure it out. Let him pick up the pieces of the mess he never thought he'd have to clean. My phone buzzed. Calls from my mother, texts from friends. The world was waking up, expecting a celebration, expecting a bride. But I wasn't that bride anymore. I stepped outside, inhaling the cool morning air. Freedom smelled like coffee and wet pavement. It smelled like fresh possibility. And as I walked toward the waiting car, leaving behind the life I almost settled for, I felt lighter than I had in years. I was halfway to the airport when the calls really started, his name flashing across the screen over and over, desperate now. I imagined him waking up to an empty bed, his first few moments of confusion before the realization set in. The missing suitcase, the cold silence, the emails waiting in his inbox. I wondered how long it took before panic replaced denial. I didn't pick up. Let him sweat, let him pace the room, replaying every moment, trying to figure out when he lost control. He'd call my mother next, then my friends. He'd beg for answers, spin his own version of events. She must have gotten cold feet. She's overwhelmed. She'll come around. He didn't know yet that there was no coming back from this. Outside the car window, the city blurred past, people going about their lives, unaware that mine had just taken the sharpest turn imaginable. And yet, I wasn't afraid. The old me, the one who would have been paralyzed by fear, drowning in shame, worrying about how this would look to everyone else, she was gone. This wasn't running away. This was reclaiming something that had been slipping through my fingers for years. Myself. At a red light, I glanced down at my engagement ring, a stunning, glittering reminder of the man I had once trusted without hesitation. I slid it off and placed it on the empty seat beside me. It didn't belong on my hand anymore. I wasn't his. I never really had been, not in the way I deserved. By the time I reached the airport, the weight of what I had done should have hit me. Maybe I should have felt guilt, regret, or even a tinge of sadness for the life I had so easily abandoned. But all I felt was certainty. A deep, resounding certainty that this was the only choice I could have made. I walked through the terminal, past families, honeymooners, and business travelers rushing to their gates. No one looked at me twice. I was just another person moving forward, carrying nothing but a single suitcase and a quiet kind of defiance. My phone vibrated again, his name persistent, pleading. I let it ring. Then, without hesitation, I blocked his number. At the check-in counter, the airline agent smiled warmly. "Traveling alone today?" she asked, her fingers poised over the keyboard. I nodded. "Yes," I said, feeling the truth of that word settle in my bones. Alone, and for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. She printed my boarding pass, sliding it across the counter. "Enjoy your trip." I took it, gripping the paper like a ticket to something bigger than a destination. This wasn't just a trip. This was the beginning of something new, something that belonged only to me. I turned towards security, stepping forward without looking back. The plane hummed beneath me as I stared out the window, watching the city shrink below. I should have felt strange sitting here alone, heading toward a honeymoon without a groom. But the truth was, I had never felt lighter. No suffocating expectations, no forced smiles, no pretending. Just me, a passport, and a one-way ticket to the kind of freedom I hadn't realized I was craving. The flight attendant came by, offering champagne to the newlyweds around me. I hesitated for only a second before nodding. Yes, please. She handed me a glass, tilting her head slightly, celebrating something. I took a sip, the bubbles crisp and cool against my lips. Yeah, I said, leaning back into my seat. Something like that. Because why shouldn't I celebrate? I had just saved myself from a lifetime of betrayal, from a man who never deserved me. I had rewritten my own story in the 11th hour, and now I was heading somewhere breathtaking, somewhere new. The idea of it sent a thrill through me. For the first time in forever, I didn't have to consider anyone else's needs, anyone else's desires. Every moment of this trip would be mine. I glanced at my phone, scrolling past unopened messages, all from people demanding explanations. My mother, friends, even a few from his number. Pathetic, scrambling attempts to regain control. I exhaled slowly, then powered my phone off. I didn't owe anyone a damn thing. The moment I stepped off the plane, the warm air wrapped around me like a quiet promise. The airport was buzzing, couples holding hands, families wrangling luggage, sun-kissed travelers moving with ease. I walked through it all, untethered, anonymous, free. The driver held a sign with my name on it. "Welcome, Mark," he said with a polite nod as he took my suitcase. I slid into the back seat, watching the city unfold as we drove. Palm trees, sparkling water, the soft hum of life moving at an unhurried pace. This was supposed to be our honeymoon destination. We had picked it together, imagining long, lazy mornings and sunset dinners. But now I was here alone, and instead of grief, all I felt was relief. At the hotel, the concierge greeted me with a knowing smile. "Honeymoon suite?" he said, glancing behind me as if expecting someone to step forward. "Just me," I replied, handing over my passport. His expression flickered. Surprise, maybe curiosity, but he didn't ask questions. As I walked into the suite, I let out a slow breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the ocean, the bed was draped in crisp white linens, and a bottle of champagne sat chilling by the window. It was beautiful, luxurious, and mine. I kicked off my shoes, ran a hand through my hair, and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I smiled. A real, unguarded, "this is just for me" smile. I didn't waste a second. The dress I had packed for a romantic dinner with him, I wore it anyway. The five-star restaurant we had reserved weeks ago, I went alone. And as I sipped on the most expensive wine on the menu, feeling the cool stem of the glass between my fingers, I realized something. I wasn't lonely, not even a little. The waiter hesitated when he approached my table. "Are you waiting for someone?" I smiled, a slow, knowing curve of my lips. "No, just me." His expression shifted, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "A woman who knows how to enjoy her own company. I like that." So did I. Between courses, I watched the couples around me, some laughing, some scrolling through their phones, some barely speaking at all. I imagined, for a moment, an alternate reality where I had gone through with the wedding, sitting here with him, playing the role of the happy newlywed. And I knew, without a doubt, I would have been miserable. Later, I walked along the beach, my bare feet sinking into the warm sand. The waves stretched endlessly in front of me, the moonlight dancing across the surface. I had been so close to building a life around a lie, so close to shrinking myself just to make someone else comfortable. But now I was here, standing in the middle of my own story, rewriting it however I pleased. I closed my eyes, inhaled the salt air, and let the past drift away. Back home, while I was sipping champagne and letting the ocean lull me into peace. His world was crumbling. And the best part? I didn't even have to lift a finger. I imagined how it started. The confusion when he woke up to an empty bed, the slow, creeping panic as he called my name through the house. Maybe, at first, he thought I had gone out for coffee or a morning jog. But then he checked his phone, the unread emails, the venue cancellation, the unanswered calls, and suddenly, the reality hit. I was gone, and I wasn't coming back. I pictured him scrolling through his phone, trying to piece together where it all went wrong, calling my mother, my friends, anyone who might have an answer. But the thing was, I hadn't given them one. There was no explanation for him to twist, no confrontation for him to manipulate his way out of, just silence. A clean, precise kind of revenge. The messages started rolling in. "Mark, please call me. We can fix this. I don't understand what's going on. Where are you?" The desperation dripping from every word. But I was halfway around the world, drinking cocktails on a balcony overlooking the sea, and his texts? They meant nothing to me now. He had bet on my loyalty, my willingness to forgive. He had built his lies on the assumption that I would never leave. He was wrong. I could almost hear the unraveling. The first wave of panic would have been manageable. He probably told himself I just needed space, that I'd cool down and come running back once I'd thought things through. He always did think he could talk his way out of anything. But when the hours stretched into a full day, then 2, then 3, and the silence remained unbroken, that's when the real damage would set in. The money, the wedding, the humiliation. He had no way out of any of it. The venue wasn't refundable. The caterers had already been paid. Flights had been booked for guests who had flown in just to watch a bride never appear. And since everything had been carefully planned under my name, with my accounts, my signatures, my careful arrangements, he was left to handle the debris. His friends, the ones he'd probably bragged to, would start asking questions. Some would believe whatever excuse he gave them. Maybe he'd say I had a breakdown, that I was unstable, that I'd lost my mind. But others? They'd put the pieces together. They'd see the cracks. And I like to imagine that at least one of them would say the words he feared the most. "You did this to yourself." And then there was her, the woman he thought was worth risking everything for. Did he run to her now? Did he expect her to fill the space I left behind? Or was she already pulling away, realizing that without me, without my stability, my patience, my blind devotion, he was nothing but a disaster waiting to happen? Maybe by now, he was sitting alone in the mess he created, staring at his phone, waiting for a call that would never come. At some point, he must have realized it, really, truly realized it, that there was no fixing this, no grand speech, no half-hearted apology, no well-rehearsed excuse would ever be enough. The old me, the one who would have sat across from him, waiting for an explanation, hoping for a reason to stay. She was gone. I imagined the moment it hit him, the weight of it pressing down, the finality of what he lost. Did he throw something in frustration? Did he bury his face in his hands? Did he stare at his phone, scrolling through our old messages, looking for the exact moment he lost control? The calls kept coming, but they no longer held urgency. They became spaced out, weaker, like he was slowly accepting the truth. He must have gone through every stage: panic, denial, anger, desperation. And now there was nothing left for him but regret. I had a choice. I could let him rot in the uncertainty, or I could give him one final message, one final nail in the coffin. I picked up my phone, considered for a moment, then typed, "You threw this away, not me." And then, without hesitation, I blocked him. His number, his email, every trace of him erased. It was done. For real this time. He could sit in his ruin while I built something better. There was no rush to go home, no one waiting for me, no obligations pulling me back. For the first time in years, my life wasn't dictated by someone else's needs. So instead of returning to the place where everything had fallen apart, I extended my trip a few more nights, a few more stolen moments of peace. Because why not? Mornings were slow, filled with coffee on the balcony and long walks along the beach. Afternoons were indulgent, massages, unfamiliar flavors, sun warming my skin as I let myself just be. At first, I thought the solitude would be too loud, that my thoughts would spiral and drag me back into the past. But they didn't. Each day that passed, he felt more like a distant shadow, something that once loomed over me but no longer had any weight. One evening, I found myself in a quiet bar, sipping on a cocktail that tasted like citrus and possibility. A man sat a few stools away, catching my eye with a half smile. He was handsome, but that wasn't what made me pause. It was the fact that, for the first time in a long time, I felt no rush to be anything for anyone, no pressure to impress, no urge to prove my worth. I wasn't looking for a replacement. I wasn't looking for anything at all. And that was the real victory, wasn't it? Not revenge, not his downfall, just this: the certainty that I was enough, all on my own. The days blurred into something soft and golden, a rhythm I didn't have to fight against. No schedule, no expectations, just movement when I wanted it, and stillness when I needed it. I read books without checking the time, swam until my muscles ached, took afternoon naps with the windows open so the sea breeze could drift in. Every now and then, my thoughts would wander back to him, not in longing, not in anger, just in quiet realization how small he seemed now, how insignificant. There was a time when I thought loving him defined me, when I believed that our future was the only future. But here I was, in a place we had planned to experience together, living it better without him. One afternoon, I booked a boat tour along the coast. As the yacht cut through the waves, I stood at the railing, watching the horizon stretch endlessly ahead. Somewhere in the distance, dolphins broke through the surface, moving freely, weightlessly, without hesitation. I closed my eyes, inhaled deeply, and felt something shift inside me, something unshackling, something settling. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't escaping. I was simply here, existing, belonging fully to myself. When I opened my eyes, I smiled, because for the first time in as long as I could remember, the future didn't scare me. On my last morning, I woke early, before the sun had fully risen. The air was cool, the ocean quiet, as if the world itself was holding its breath. I stepped onto the balcony with a cup of coffee, wrapping my hands around the warmth, letting the moment sink in. This was it. The ending, or maybe the beginning. I had come here as a runaway bride, a woman escaping a life that had almost trapped her. But I wasn't escaping anymore. I had rewritten the story. I wasn't the girl who had been left, or the woman scorned. I was simply me, whole, untethered, free. Before heading to the airport, I did one last thing. I scrolled through my phone, past the missed calls, the unopened messages, until I found what I was looking for. Our last photo together, the final relic of the life I almost chose. I stared at it for a moment, searching for something. Pain, regret, nostalgia. But there was nothing, just a stranger beside a woman who no longer existed. With one tap, I deleted it. No hesitation, no second guessing. As I wheeled my suitcase through the lobby, the concierge smiled. "Leaving so soon?" "Not really," I said, returning the smile. "Just going somewhere new." And with that, I stepped forward, toward a future that was mine and mine alone.